obviously everyone knows what Joshua means now already, right? I mentioned, many times, right? So Joshua means it's literally, it's a savior, sort of. So I don't have to explain too much. So we're going to jump right into Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into this land that I am giving to them, to the people of that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given it to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and the Lebanon as far as a great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, to great sea towards the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the laws that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success. Wherever you go, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all this that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have a good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So now, after Moses died at the mountain Nebo, now they're about to cross the Jordan. So they're preparing themselves to enter into the promised land. And the promise that God made to Abraham. So when you turn to Genesis chapter 15, Genesis chapter 15, we're going to read from verse 18 and on. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of a Kenizzite, and Cadmonite, and Hittites, and Perizzites, and Rephaim, the Amorites, and Canaanites, and Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So what we just read in Joshua chapter 1, verse 4, is pretty much what God said to Abraham, hundreds of years ago. And the promise that God made with Abraham is now about to be fulfilled, because this is the promise that God gave, almost hundreds of years ago, that I will do this. And obviously, Abraham did not see this. He only heard the promise, but he'd never seen it was fulfilled. But now his descendants is now seeing it. As actually he said, he mentioned that his offspring will be moving into Egypt, and then they'll stay there for 400 years, and then I'm going to bring back to the land where I promised, which is exactly what was fulfilled. So the thing is, when God makes the promise and when he makes the covenant, there are things that we will see there are things that we will not see. Just because we did not see does not mean it will not be fulfilled. Like, for example, God actually made a promise that things will happen in the Revelations, which John did not see. He only saw the visions. He hasn't seen it was fulfilled. And for the people who have lived for the last 2,000 years, obviously they have not seen what was fulfilled in the Revelations. We're not even sure whether we're gonna see it either, but we know that it will be fulfilled based on all the history that we have seen in the last thousands of years that God has promised and that was fulfilled. So because all the covenant or the promise that God made had been fulfilled, that's how we know that it will also be fulfilled at the end. So when we actually read something like this, we have to always reference back, when did God promise this? Was it fulfilled? So you'll be able to see and confirm that everything God said is fulfilled. That's very important. One of the other thing is, remember, after Moses died, God appointed Joshua to lead the people, to bring them into the promised land, which I mentioned that this is a very critical point because Moses kind of represent the first coming of the Jesus Christ. And Joshua is also as representing the second coming of Jesus to take us to the promised land. God said to Joshua in verse 5, it says, "No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life, just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you." This promise is sort of a conditional, meaning that he will be with Joshua, he will be to Israel as long as they keep their faith and believe in the Lord. If they don't, if they forsake the Lord, and if they forsake God's law, then obviously God will not stay them. I just want to show you something. Let's turn to Ezekiel for a second. Ezekiel. Chapter 8. Ezekiel chapter 8. We're going to read from verse 5. "Then he said to me, Son of man, lift up your eyes now towards the north. So I lift up my eyes towards the north. And behold, north of the altar gate, in the entrance was this image of jealousy. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see that they are doing the great abominations that the house of Israel are committing here, to drive me far from my sanctuary? But you will see still greater abominations." When you read this particular verse, God is actually taking Ezekiel's, when he was in Babylon, he was actually brought to Babylon as he was actually taken into Babylon as the slaves, and then he saw the visions from the Lord. So God actually took Ezekiel's souls and spirit and brought him down to Israel while he's still at in Babylon. And what God showed Ezekiel was that currently in Israel, in the temple side, they actually stood the idols in the temple, and that's what Ezekiel is actually seeing. So what God is saying here in verse particularly verse 6, is that, and he said to me, God said to Ezekiel, Son of man, do you see what they are doing, the great abominations that the house of Israel are committing here, in the temple side, obviously, to drive me far from my sanctuary. So pay attention. Israel is driving God out of the sanctuary. It's not God is actually leaving the sanctuary, but Israelite is pushing God out of the sanctuary by worshiping the idols in the temple side. Which means, even in our church today, God is not just leaving the church, but people are driving God out of the church by doing the wrong thing. God is not leaving the church because he doesn't like it. We're the one who's pushing him out. We're doing the things that we think it is right. They're thinking that, what they're doing is right. But they actually rose God's anger by doing the wrong thing. They're doing what God told them not to do it. So we have to be extremely careful that we don't drive out the Lord from our own church. So God said, coming back to Joshua, he said, I will be with you. I will not forsake you. As long as you stay in me, as long as you actually follow the commitments that I gave through Moses. And he also said, verse 6, is be strong and courageous. And verse 7 also said, only be strong and very courageous. And verse 9 it says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Now, what does this mean? Why does he keep repeating these words? Why God has kept saying to Joshua, be courageous and be strong? It is important, correct? But go a little further. Literally, when you actually think about this, Joshua, he's the man of faith. All right? He's a man of faith. He actually watched what God had done in the wilderness. And he watched what Moses were doing and how God was actually communicating to Moses and showing all these miraculous things and wonders that, he has seen in the wilderness. So he knows the God's power. He knows who God is. But at the same time, we as a human, we oftentimes lose our faith. Although we know God, but we're not strong, we're not courageous. Which means God is emphasizing, I understand. You feel weak. I understand. You're not, you're like, sort of like, you feel uncomfortable. I just remind you, be strong. Be courageous, because I will be with you. Because Joshua, God knows Joshua's heart. He's not really strong right now. He's not really courageous. So God has kept saying to him, I understand how you feel. You're going to be facing something that you don't know. But don't worry, I will be with you. So sometimes we kind of, imagine that everyone that we see in the Bible, they're like, these people are very different. Their level is like way beyond our, capabilities. Like Moses, like so a great man, is a man of faith, and Joshua, the other one, is so strong. Not really. They're all weak, just like us. Sometimes one day we feel very strong, and other day like, I'm not sure. God knows his heart. I understand. So God is emphasizing to Joshua, be strong, be courageous. So once again, verse 9, it says, do not be frightened. Why is he saying that? Because he is frightened. Just don't be frightened. I will be with you. So they're no different than us. That's why God has kept saying, don't worry, I will be with you. So when we actually, believe that I have a fate, you probably have experienced yourself that one day your faith is very strong, and the other day your faith is very, very weak. It's like a roller coaster, right? And remember, whenever you lose your faith because of all the surrounding situations and what people said and how you responded, how you're actually dealing with your circumstances, whatever it may be, remember this. This is why we have to keep reminding ourselves, yes, God is with me. Because God is with me, although I'm very weak, although I have very little faith, God is with me. Because God is with me, I can do this. Not because I'm strong, not because I can do it, because God is helping me, God is with me, that I can do this. We have to encourage ourselves. We have to actually be strong because God is with me. So verse 8, he said, this book of the law, obviously the book of the law is literally from Genesis through Deuteronomy, shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. This is very, very important. The Word is everything we have. Don't try to listen to God's message through your own ears. God is not going to whisper to your ears about what you need to do. But God will give you the guidance that you need through the words. Which means we have to get close with this book and the word that is giving it to us. As I mentioned several times, the less you meditate the God's word, your faith will drift away. I guarantee you. The less you get close with the word, the less faith you will have. The more you get close to the word, your faith will get stronger. Verse 10, and Joshua commanded the officers of people, pass through the midst of camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go into take possessions of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. How long? 3 days. And to the Reubenites and Gadites and half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest. Will give you this land, your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses will give you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers, and shall help them, until the Lord gives a rest to your brothers as he has to you. And they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possessions, and shall possess it, and the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan towards the sunrise. And they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go, just as we obeyed Moses in all things. So we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you, and as he was with Moses. Whoever rebel against your commandments and disobeys your words, whatever you command them, shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. So, what is it saying? When you look at the verse 13 carefully, it says, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. So the land that you're entering into, which is a Canaan, which is the promised land, is what place? Resting place. And I emphasize it from the Genesis. This is why the seventh day was the day of rest. This is what God mentioned. Come to me. Right? I'm going to bring you into my rest. So ultimately, where we need to be is we need to be in God's resting place. That's the ultimate place. Right? So we all have to be in this place where we live. Don't get too comfortable here. This is not your resting place. This is not where we're going to stay. This is just temporary house where we're going to stay in this land. Once we leave this place, now we're going to go to the promised land, which is the resting place. So this is just representations that God will bring us to the resting place. Who's going to bring us to the resting place? Jesus will. Chapter 2. And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly and Shittim as spies, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. So, remember when Moses had sent the spies, when he actually, reached at the border of the wilderness to the Canaan. How many spies did he send? 30 men. 12. All right. They selected each man from each tribe. All right, 1 man from each tribe. So they sent 12 spies to the promised land to spy it out for 40 days. And then when they came back, only 2, which is Joshua and Caleb, is the one who gave the proper report and said, it's a beautiful land and it's just like flowing with milk and honey, and then God is going to give it to us. Let's go. But the rest of the 10 people, I said, yes, that's what we saw, but what we saw was just the big guys there that there's no way that we'll be able to actually get in. We're like a grasshopper before these people, right? Remember that? So out of those 12 people, only 2 came back and gave the faithful report, and the rest of the 10 people did not. They saw the same exact thing, but their report were different. And who followed? So all the Israelites, after they heard the news from these 12 people, who did they believe? Did they believe those 2 people, or did they believe 10 people? They listened to 10 spies instead of those 2. So usually, when more people talking the same thing, well, that must be right. That's how it goes, right? Let me tell you this. How does your church system works? When there is a meetings, when there's some ideas that people want to follow, or the directions where the church is going to go, and hundreds of people is going to say let's go do this, and only 2 people saying oh no, that's not what we should be doing. We should be doing the other things. Then who do you think the congregation is going to follow? Those 2 or hundreds? Exactly. You have to remember, in church, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. We go by what God said, whether it's 100 or 2. When you actually read Jeremiah, every prophet at that time was just saying, Babylon is not coming. God will always protect us. Israel will not fall. Jeremiah was the only one. He was the only prophet that said, God told me that Babylon is coming. We will be completely destroyed. And everyone was believing the other prophets, which is false prophets. Because everyone was saying that. So, I'll show you some interesting story here. Maybe let's turn to 2 King. Second King. No, it's not Second King. It's a First King. We're going to turn to First King chapter 22. First King chapter 22. We're going to read from verse 1. For 3 years Assyria and Israel continued without war. But in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat the king of Judah came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said to his servants, Do you know the Ramoth of Gilead belonged to us, and we kept quiet and do not take it out of the hand of king of Assyria? And he said to Jehoshaphat, Will you go with me to battle at Ramoth and Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, Inquire first for the word of the Lord. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophet together, about 400 men, and said to them, Shall I go to battle against the Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? And they said, Go up, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king. But Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here another prophet of the Lord of whom we may inquire? And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, There is yet one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, Micaiah, the son of Imlah. But I hate him, for he never prophesies a good concerning me, but evil. And Jehoshaphat said, Let not the king say so. The king of Israel summoned the officers and said, Bring quickly Micaiah, the son of Imlah. Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, were sitting on the throne, arrayed their robes. and the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah the son of Chenaanah made for himself horns of irons, and said, "Though, says the Lord, with these you shall push the Syrian until they are destroyed." And all the prophets and prophesied so that said, "Go up to Ramoth Gilead and triumph. The Lord will give it into the hand of the king." And the messenger who went to summon the Micaiah said to him, "Behold, the word of the prophet with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably." But the Micaiah said, "As the Lord lives, what the Lord says to me, that I will speak." And then he had come to the king. The king said to them, "Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to a battle, or shall we refrain?" And he answered, "Go up and triumph. The Lord will give it into the hand of the king." But the king said to him, "How many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?" And he said, "I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains, and as a sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, These have no master. Let each return to him home in peace." And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil?" But Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him, and his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" And one said, one thing, another, and said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, "I will entice him." And the Lord said to him, "By what means?" And he said, "I will go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And he said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so." Now therefore, behold, the Lord put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. The Lord has declared disasters for you. Then Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek, and said, "How did the Spirit of the Lord go from me to speak to you?" And Micaiah said, "Behold, you shall see on that day when you go into the inner chamber to hide yourself." And the king of Israel said, "Seize Micaiah and take him back to Ammon, the governor of the city, and Joash, the king of Sun, and say, Thus says the king, put this fellow in prison and feed him meager rations of bread and water until I come in peace." And Micaiah said, "If you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me." And he said, "Hear, all your people." So when you read this story, okay, so Ahab and Jehoshaphat, which is a king of Israel and king of Judah, gather. They're about to go to war to Syria. So he called all the prophets, about 400 of them gather, and said, they asked, "Shall we go to Ramoth Gilead, or shall we refrain?" And all 400 prophets says, "Oh, go. God will hand this over to you. You will triumph. Go ahead." And then Jehoshaphat said, Hold on. Is there any other prophet? So Jehoshaphat, at least is coming from Judah. He's actually he's like little suspicious about all this 400 prophets. Is there any other prophet that we can inquire? I said, Ahab said, "Well, hold on a second. There's another guy that I know of. His name is Micaiah. All right, but I don't like you because he never said anything good to me. He's always said something evil." It's like, No. He must be the right prophet. Let's bring him in. So he summoned him, and so all these messengers went to him and said, the messenger said to, Micaiah and said, like, listen, Micaiah, there are 400 prophets, right? He's saying to the king Ahab and said, God will actually hand the Syrians over to you. So please walk along with these people. Say the same thing what they're saying. Don't just make any, it's like the crazy like prophecies. Just go, walk with them. Say the same thing. Right? Don't create trouble for people. Exactly. See, so you get the story, right? So he said the same thing what other 400 prophets said. And then now the Ahab said, hold on, didn't I tell you to tell me the truth? So like, wait a second. I told you everything you want to hear. But you don't want to hear it. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you the truth now. So you all going to die, okay? And then Ahab said he's mad now. Like, did you hear them? Like, you see? He's always saying bad thing to me. So like, because like, what do you want from me? The thing is, there's a funny stories in the Bible that which most people don't even know. Okay? So like, this is a funny story, okay? So why is Ahab and even Jehoshaphat wants to hear this, from the prophet? So 400 of them are saying the same thing. They're harmonizing. Everyone saying the same exact thing. 400, okay? But these numbers are greater than one guy, which is Micaiah, which was only true prophet. The rest of the 400 is a false prophet. So who, it's because of their numbers are greater. Who do you think will they're going to listen? Obviously 400. Because everyone is saying that. It must be right. It's not just one or two. It's not 10. It's not 100. It's 400. It must be right. But was it right? No. All 400 of them are wrong. Only this Micaiah is the only true prophet. And then Ahab said, put him in the jail. All right? Just don't give him a good food, just to give him a crap. And then I will see him when I come back. And Micaiah said, really? Let's see if you're going to come back. Obviously, Ahab never came back. Right? He died in the battlefield. He never came back. So, once again, is the more number of people is trustworthy? No, not really. Only people who listens to God's word is the trustworthy. They're the only one that we need to trust. It's not the numbers. Think about it. Church does not go by the democracy. Sorry, it is not democracy. It is not. We go by what God said, not the number said. So, Joshua learned a lesson. Sending 12 people doesn't help. Only 2 came back with the right report. So now Joshua said, you know what? Forget this 12 people. We're only going to send 2. I don't know if you remember. What is the meaning of number 2? Correct. Number of witness. Right? So he only sent 2. Let's see what happened here. So he only sent 2 people, and they met Rahab. And continue on. We're going to read from verse 2. And it was told to the king of Jericho, Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, True, the man came to me, but I did not know where they were from. But I did not know where they were, and then the gate was about to be closed. At dark, the man went out. I do not know where the man went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalk of a flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the man pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords. And the gate was shut as soon as the pursuer had gone out. Before the man lay down, she came up to the man on the roof, and said to the man, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan, and Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destructions. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God is in the heaven above and on the earth beneath. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver out our lives from death. And the man said to her, Our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then with the Lord give us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Then she let them down by the rope through the window, and her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, Go into the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way. The man said to her, We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you have made us swear. Behold, when we came into the land, you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and you shall gather into your house your fathers and mother, your brothers, and all your father's household. Then, if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid on anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our hand. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be guiltless with respect to your oath that you have made us swear. And she said, According to your words, so be it. Then she sent them away, and they departed. And she tied the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and went into the hills, and remained there 3 days until the pursuers returned, and the pursuer searched all along the way and found nothing. Then the 2 men returned. They came down from the hill and passed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun. And they told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us. So this chapter 2 is a very interesting story, and at the same time it's very important story. So we know this story very well, and everybody probably is aware of this story as well. So there's a few interesting facts that we need to find out from this particular chapter. Let's read from verse 9 again. I actually read from verse 8. Before the man lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the man, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destructions. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Listen carefully what Rahab is saying. Who is Rahab? I forget this prostitute. Who is she? Well, you've gone too far. Right. So Rahab is Canaanite woman. Okay, so she's confessing what God had done how long ago? 40 years ago. 40 years ago, God splitted the Red Sea that Israelites crossed the river, or the Red Sea, right? 40 years ago. Okay, so have you lived the 40 years in your life here? No. Do you remember exactly what happened 30 years ago? Someone said something to you? Obviously no. You don't even remember what someone said 20 years ago. Right? 40 years ago this happened. Okay? She remembered. Who is she? She's a Canaanite. She's not Israelite. But when you listen to her confession, it's like the confession of Israelites. She knows who God is. She has the right definition who God is. Right? As a matter of fact, her confession is better than Israelites. What Israelites did, over the 40 years in the desert, they betrayed God so many times, not believing what God had done. Right? But Rahab remembered everything what God had done to Israelites. And what she said, carefully listen to what she's saying. I'm going to read this again. Verse 10. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. Listen. She heard. It's not what she saw. She didn't even see this. She heard the news. Remember, where does the faith come from? Hearing. Her faith was built based on what she heard, not what she saw. Israelites, on the other hand, they saw that God splitted the Red Sea, but they did not believe. But Rahab, on the other hand, did not see that God splitted the water, but she believed by hearing it. The faith comes by hearing, not by seeing it. And verse 11 said the same thing. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in our man. So her faith was only by hearing. She believed that God is the God of heaven, and God is with Israel, and God will take down this land. When you actually read it carefully later on, this particular town where she's leaving, which is Jericho, is a stronghold, very high wall, and very strong. So this is one of the fortress that no one can take this down. But she believed it doesn't really matter how high our wall is. It doesn't matter how strong our wall is. The wall, this stronghold will not going to hold us or protect us. As long as God is with Israel, we're all dead. She didn't care what was there. She knew what God will do to them. This is why she was pretty much betting on everything, even her life, to these two men. Please, save us. Once again, she doesn't know the future, but she knows what God will do to them. It's like before, the Israelites attacked them. Once again, this Jericho is a very strong fortress. No one believed that this, Jericho will fall down. No one believed, but she did. Not because the wall is very strong, because she believed that God will do. And then she said very interesting things, verse 12. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you will deal kindly with my father's house and give me a sure sign. Give me a sign that I will be protected and my family will be protected. Pay attention. So, she is the pagan woman, non-Israelites, and she believed what God will do, and she was asking for a sign that we will be protected. So, verse 15, it says, Then she let them down by the rope through the window, for the house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, Go into the hills, and or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way. The man said to her, We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you have made us swear. Behold, when we came into the land, you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and you shall gather into your house your fathers and mother, and your brothers, and all your father's household. Then, if anyone goes out of the door of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid on anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our hand. Does it remind you anything? Exactly. It's the Passover. Scarlet cord over the window, and you have to be inside the house. If you get out of the house, you're dead. You stay inside, you're protected. So let me ask you, is Rahab's family all righteous people? No. No. But just by staying inside the house with the scarlet cord outside the window, you're protected. You are saved. That's exactly the same as the Passover. But the difference is, Passover, it was for the Israelites. This is for pagan Gentiles. Woman, the church. Do you be able to actually kind of like link those together? Yeah. So you should be able to read the story of what this story is about. The story is about the salvation of Jesus, the blood of Jesus Christ. And if you stay inside, you are protected. So what is the sign? The sign is scarlet cord. What is that scarlet cord? That's the blood of Jesus Christ. Exactly the same story. Not because they're righteous, not because they're kind, not because they're different from others. Everyone inside of Jericho, they're supposed to be destroyed. Everyone. Rahab and her family as well. But because she believed and asked for a sign, that's why she was saved. Through her faith, she heard the news, she believed, she knew who God is, she knew what God will do to them, and that led her and her family to be saved through her. What did her family do? Nothing. It was just her. And listen to her and staying inside the house with the red scarlet. But what if she actually, let down of a blue cord? Will that save her? No. It has to be the red scarlet. Because that's what they will tell them. Do not touch the house with the scarlet cord outside the window. Do not touch that house. But if you tell them like there's a blue, there's a green, there's a black, guess what? Doesn't matter what you actually let down. You're dead. Just the red scarlet. That's it. So now you get the story of what this is about. And when they returned, they knew already. Joshua thought in verse 23 and 24, it says, Then the two men returned, the witness came back. They came down from the hills and passed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and they told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants to the land melt away because of us. So Joshua knew what will happen. He knew that God already handed over, Jericho to their hands. So let's turn to Ezekiel again one more time. We're going to read from chapter 9. We read the chapter 8 before, right? Ezekiel chapter 9. Then he cried in my ears, with a loud voice, saying, Bring near the executioners of the city, each with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his weapon for slaughter in his hand. With them was a man clothed in linen, with the writing case at his waist. And they went in and stood beside the bronze altar. Now the glory of the God of Israel had gone up from the cherub on which it rested to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed in linen, who had the writing case at his waist. And the Lord said to him, Pass through the city, through Jerusalem, and put a mark on the forehead of the man who sigh and groan over all the abominations that are committed in it. And to the others he said in my hearing, Pass through the city after him, and strike. Your eyes shall not spare, and you shall show no pity. Kill old men outright, young men, maidens, little children, and women, but touch no one on whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were before the house. Then he said to them, Defile the house and fill the courts with the slain. Go out. So they went out and struck in the city. And while they were striking, and I was left alone, I fell upon my face and cried, Ah, Lord God, will you destroy all the remnant of Israel in the outpouring of your wrath on Jerusalem? So, as I mentioned in chapter 8, God took Ezekiel's souls and spirit and brought him down to Israel and showed him all the abominations, all the wrongdoing of the Israelites doing in the temple side, right? So God showed another vision, and there's 4 people standing there, one with the writing tablets. And God said, anyone who's actually crying over and groaning over their actions, put the mark on their forehead. And then he orders all the executioners and said, anyone who does not have signs on their forehead or a mark on their forehead, kill them. Whether they're old, young, women, children, don't care. Don't give any pity. Slaughter them. Kill them all. Okay, what do they have on their forehead? The marks on their forehead, which is very similar story in the Revelations as well. Same exact story. The sign, the mark, it's all the same. Passover, put the blood over the blood of lamb over the door frame. That's a sign and mark. Same thing here. The scarlet cord is a mark or the sign. Do you get that? It's the same exact story. So, coming back to Joshua. So now you understand what the story is about. Okay. Chapter 3. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Sittim, and they camped to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officer went through the camp, and commanded the people. So as you can see here, 3 days are keep repeating here. You see that? It's all 3 days. Verse 5. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourself, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonder among you. And Joshua said to the priest, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they might know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priest who bared the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fall drive out from before you the Canaanites and Hittites and Hivites and Perizzites and Girgashites and Amorites and Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribe of Israel, from each tribe of man, and when the sole of the feet of the priest bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from the flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So, when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan, with the priest bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priest bearing the ark were dipped into the brink of the waters, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. The waters coming down from above and stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is besides Zarethan, and those flowing down towards the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nations finished the passing over the Jordan. So they're ready to advance into the Jericho. So they're about to do so. But when they actually left the Sittim, and then when they arrived at Jordan, and 3 days later, so God said, go about 2,000 cubits ahead of them. And then all the priests was holding the Ark of Covenant on their shoulders, and just they're leading the Israelites. And as they're actually reached at the Jordan River, soon as the priest, their feet, the priest who's holding this covenant of Ark of Covenant, their feet touches the Jordan River, that's when the water starts to split, which is a slightly different than what we saw when they crossed the Red Sea, but somewhat similar story. So in this, which most of you already know the story here as well, but there is a very, very important message, in this. Well, almost every chapter that I cover is almost important. But you have to understand what this story is about. Okay. So, when they actually reached, why did the water split it? Is that because the power of the priest, the feet, just shown that like it splitted the water? What really splitted the water? Because of the Ark of Covenant they were holding. That's why the water split it. Okay? Jordan. What is the meaning of Jordan? So, let me share something. You see the screen? I know it's kind of small. So, Jordan is the root word coming from Yarden. So, Yarden means it's like coming down. It's something is descending from high. Okay? It's so called from descending, flowing down. It's something is coming from above and down. Okay? And this is what the today's Jordan River looks like. Which is not a really big river, right? It's a somewhat small river. It's not that great. When you look, this is the Jordan River. Look like stream rather than actually like river, right? But when there is actually harvest time, so there is a waters actually is more than just a stream, but it's like a lot more waters. So this river, it is not that big. It's just small. But still, this water, imagine this water gets split in half, right? So now what we need to pay attention here is, once again, let's read from verse 14 again. So, when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priest bearing the ark were deep in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all the banks throughout the time of harvest. So now the waters are actually, very, very high now. And imagine why God is actually making them to cross the river when it's actually the waters are very high. Exactly. This lots of water is represent death. Okay? And pay attention to that. God is intentionally making them cross that river when there's a waters are high. In harvest time, the waters coming down from above stood. So waters are coming down from above, which is like Jordan, that's what I meant, right? I mentioned descending, coming from above and down, right? Stood and rose up in the heap very far away at the city that is besides Zarethan. right? Okay. Now, I'm going to show you. Where did they stop? The water coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam. Waters stop at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, right? So, Adam is what? Adam is the man, the first man, right? Zarethan. So let's take a look at what Zarethan means. Just looking at it. You see this? To pierce, puncture. First man. The man is pierced. And the waters are splitted. Death is moved away and show the living path. Do you understand what that is? It is Jesus Christ. So his death, which is to pierce through him, right? He separated the death and opened a living path. So when you look at this very carefully, the whole story, which we just read from chapter 2 and chapter 3, is all about our salvation. How he opened the path for us so that we can get into the promised land. Through what? Through Jesus Christ. Through what? Through the signs that he's given us. So, now, Jericho has not gone down yet. So what's first? Jesus has to die, and he has to be pierced, die, and rose again. This is why you keep seeing 3 days. Understand? So the man is pierced and opened the depth of waters and split it into the living path. Once they cross, later on, which we'll not cover today, but they're going to advance into the Jericho, and everyone will be struck down except the house that has the scarlet cord hanging outside the window, which is the judgment. But whoever has the sign will be saved. Now can you kind of like map the story? Now you're seeing the real story here. Not just the story of Rahab, not the story that water just split it, but the real story behind this, what God is actually showing us through this story. Understand? So, you have to understand. So, you see this, the word here, the sod, right? This sod is actually, when you look at it, is what? A side. So where Jesus was actually pierced, not only his actually, hands and his foot, but also his side was pierced as well. Right? So this is the exact story of the death of Jesus Christ. To open he basically splitted the water, which is a death, into the living path. So chapter 4 is pretty much, now this is all connected. Chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4 and 5, it's all connected together. And then you'll be able to actually map what this story is about. So literally, this story is about death of Jesus Christ, resurrections, and how he saved us and who will be saved. That's the story of the chapter of the story that we're going to be learning. Okay, we won't be able to actually cover chapter 4 because I will not have enough time to cover chapter 4 in the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to save this for the next Saturday. But up to this, do you have any questions or comments?